Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of Deep True Crime. I'm Manny Rodriguez. In today's episode, we are continuing the coverage of the Idaho 4. Four University of Idaho students were killed in a quadruple homicide right off campus at their rented apartment. So we're going to give you an update around what do we know now? Is there anything behind all these 911 calls that have been going on? The uptick around 911 calls is higher than ever, including all of October. And so we're going to be diving into what we know. We're going to be diving into the seized 5 vehicles. My question around that is, how come they weren't seized sooner? It's been 2 weeks. They haven't even named a suspect. Why did it take 2 weeks for them to get the cars? Let's go ahead and dive into what we know so far. Authorities have seized 5 vehicles from the scene of the Idaho quadruple murders. Again, more than 2 weeks after 4 university students were brutally stabbed to death in their beds at the off-campus house. Again, it took them 2 weeks. That part I am not understanding. The snow-covered cars, they were towed away from the residence and hauled away to a more secure long-term storage location. That way they can continue processing for evidence. Forensic investigators were earlier this week spotted at the off-campus house. They were dusting windows for fingerprints, scouring the crime scene, and walking in a nearby wooded area, looking for anything that can even show that there was a stalker or anyone who was preying on this house following the girls or Ethan around. What we don't know, we still just really don't know. But tow trucks on yesterday, November 29th, removed 5 cars belonging to the victims and the survivors of the attack as police ramped up their hunt for the quadruple murderer. Today, as part of the ongoing homicide investigation and original search warrant, there will be an increase in detective activity and tow trucks on site as investigators move 5 vehicles from within the police perimeter to a more secure long-term storage location to continue processing evidence. This was from the Moscow Police Department shared in a statement. What's so sad that the victim's family revealed, the devastated father of victim Kaylee Gonsalves has revealed that the family's fears that their daughter's killer would show up at her funeral. Steve Gonsalves told ABC News that the family have so far declined to hold a funeral service for the 21-year-old as the killer or killer's identity remains unknown. He shares, "My wife's biggest fear, part of the reason we didn't have a funeral is because she couldn't be guaranteed that that monster was going to not be there. How terrible is it that they cannot lay their daughter to rest because they fear that the killer would actually be in the vicinity of this or even arrive. People are even fearing that they were going to have a vigil tonight. It was moved because of weather. But they literally even shared that they're afraid that the killer would be at the vigil for these victims. And so that's horrifying that you cannot even celebrate life of their daughter because they're afraid that someone close to them is tied to this murder, that someone who might go to the University of Idaho might be tied to this murder. They're basically saying that someone that may know my daughter would probably be at the vigil to not set off any alarms. We've seen this time and time again in the past. Now, the Moscow police, they have kind of changed the timeline of the final movements. And so the Moscow police have updated the timeline of two of the victims' last known movements, citing digital evidence that they had received. In a press conference on Sunday, police revealed that Kaylee Gonsalves and Madison Mogen returned to the home on King Road from their night out at around 1:56 a.m. on November 13th. Now, previously, investigators had said that the two best friends arrived home at around 1:45 a.m. Arrival time has been updated based on digital evidence collected by investigators, authorities shared. The pair had spent the night at the corner club in downtown Moscow, arriving at around 10 p.m. on November 12th and leaving at around 1:30 a.m. the next morning. They then paid a visit to the Grub Truck late night food spot at around 1:40 a.m. before getting a ride home from a private party there. The other two victims, Zaina Kornoto and Ethan Chapin, who are a couple, they dated each other, they arrived back at the home at around 1:45, police said. And so they've updated that timeline as opposed to that 1:45 original, where they said all of them got home around 1:45. Wasn't quite accurate, as now digital evidence has provided the federal law enforcement. Now, one of the things that was kind of suspicious, a man was spotted taking down tip posters. Why would they do that? And so a suspicious man was spotted taking these tip posters down from around Moscow. And this was according to a 911 call. In the 911 call, a caller told police that they had seen a suspicious man walking around removing posters with information about a tip line last Tuesday. Now, this has been over a week. I'm just kind of catching up on some of the things that I haven't shared as well. And so that is odd in its own. On November 20th, exactly 1 week from the killings, a 911 caller reported a male on the side of the road carrying a knife in front of him stretched out. In this, officers did not file a report about the incident. There were also 911 calls that reveals disturbing incidents reported in the wake of these murders. So 911 call logs have revealed reports of several disturbing incidents in the 2 weeks since the 4 University of Idaho students were brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus apartment. And so Moscow residents have called 911 multiple times to report different suspicious men and other concerning incidents in the small college town that, they hadn't seen a murder since 2015 in 7 years. So to have this quadruple murder is really throwing the community for a loop. Chilling complaints include a man carrying a knife, a person wearing a black ski mask, a male outside taking photos of the upper floors of a home, and reports from people believing that someone has tried to enter their home. In one particularly chilling call, a caller said that a man had given their daughter a note on the back of a receipt at her workplace with the warning, "You better watch out." Now, one student was sharing about how one of the victims, a friend, was having a normal night before the murder. And so a University of Idaho student has revealed that she saw one of the victims enjoying a normal night out just hours before she was brutally murdered in her rental home. Madison Moy told Fox News Digital that Madison Mogen, pictured here on your screen, spent much of the night on November 12th at the Corner Club bar in downtown Moscow. Miss Moy, a 21-year-old sophomore and fellow member of the Pi Beta Phi sorority, she said that she saw nothing out of the ordinary, with Mogen laughing with all of her friends at the sports bar. It was just a normal night in Moscow, she would share. Moscow is a safe place. Nothing like this ever happens. I didn't think anything of it. Miss Moy, she lives in a home behind the murder house, and said that she knew the victims and had visited their house to hang out with them multiple times. Mogen and Zaina Konoda were both members of Pi Beta Phi. Now, the close proximity from her home to the crime scene left her wondering if the killer might have passed through her yard, she admitted. It's definitely something that's crossed my mind, and that's really terrifying, she said. Now, the sister of one of the victims believes there's, in her mind, been progress with the release of at least one detail. Olivia Gonsalves, whose sister Kaylee was killed, said police made a step in the right direction by releasing a more detailed timeline of what happened in the early hours of November 13th. She says, I've been pushing that from the very beginning, and it was, I guess, a step in the right direction to see that was taken seriously. Olivia Gonsalves would share this just this past Monday, November 28th, on Cuomo. For us, it's important that the families are being listened to. Moscow police have ruled out multiple people as suspects, including the two surviving roommates who were home at the time of the killings. A man seen in surveillance video at a location where Gonsalves and Mogen, they were before going home. A person who drove Gonsalves and Mogen home was ruled out. A man Gonsalves and Mogen called multiple times in the early hours of November 13th, and an individual at the home when 911 was called. Now, an individual at the home when 911 was called, which would have been many hours after the actual crime was committed. So at 11:58, there was a call made. And so whoever was there at that time has been ruled out. And Olivia, she shared on Cuomo, again, this past Monday, you can see Cuomo in this image right here. I can only trust law enforcement has done their due diligence in all of the people they've cleared thus far. Authorities say so far they have sifted through 1,000 tips related to the deaths and have warned against speculation that has stoked community fears in the weeks since the deaths. One of those speculations was that Kaylee Gonsalves' ex-boyfriend might have been involved, which police have ruled out. Don't tell the internet sleuths that, because they do not believe it. They actually are still pointing to the ex-boyfriend Jack as a possible suspect. Again, even though police have ruled him out. But you know how the internet sleuths can go at you. You're guilty right away if there's any speculation around you. And so Olivia says, I completely agree. I could not be any happier to see that they have cleared him. From the beginning, I knew that it wasn't him, and I'm happy they're focusing their attention somewhere else. And truth is, in the internet sleuth's defense, you've heard of stories where people who are absolutely blown away after a suspect was named. Like, oh, I would have never imagined, I could have never dreamed of, there's no way, I could have not ever thought he could do such a thing. You've heard that time and time again. So you can see why some of the internet sleuths may not actually be buying it just yet. I personally don't think, I don't know. I'm believing police investigators when they rule him out. That's my thought on that. Now, one of the fathers of the murdered Idaho students, he says that she didn't suffer, his daughter. And so the father of one of the students who were murdered in her sleep earlier this month has revealed his daughter did not suffer in her final moments. Steve Gonsalves was on Good Morning America just this past Tuesday. And he said that he only learned of his daughter Kaylee's ultimate death from family members on campus, and choked up as he shared how she came home from school in an urn. Not what he would have expected. It was fast and nobody suffered and nobody felt like that kind of pain. Now, he did say that, but again, we don't really know everything, because truth is, police have said that some of the victims had defensive wounds. Now, some of them probably were killed in their sleep. As we continue to learn about the story, I'm guessing, this is just speculation from me. I could be completely wrong, but I'm guessing that there were some that had defensive wounds, some that did not. Whoever had defensive wounds means that they were trying to fight back, so that is a painful death. Some bled out, they were not completely dead. That to me is painful. Maybe this is his way of coping with it a little easier, but it's hard to believe that none of them had any pain. He said he only found out about his daughter's untimely demise from family members on campus before police confirmed her death. And he was trying to call Madison, Kaylee's best friend, for years, and only to find that Madison wasn't responding to the phone calls either. Steve said, "I haven't earned the ability to grieve the way that I want to grieve. I want to be able to just have justice first." He had previously spoken out about his frustration with the lack of any new information in the investigation, which has entered its third consecutive week with no suspect. Still, police say that it was a targeted attack. They do say that, but police are also saying that we should not have used the word targeted. It leaves way too much confusion. And that's why they're like, who could have been targeted now? Which also goes back to the stalker. Police have not been able to confirm a stalker yet. But one of the dads, I believe it's Steve, we'll find out here in a second, but he says that his daughter did say to him that there was a stalker, and but Olivia Gonsalves says that my sister didn't have a stalker. So a little contradiction there again. Still an ongoing case. And so the 911 call apparently came after Kaylee and Madison's friends were not able to reach them after incessantly calling and texting their numbers over and over. The two girls were found still in their beds on the top floor of the house, with cops maintaining they were still asleep when the unknown assailant stabbed them with a knife. Which makes me think that the two girls did not have the defensive wounds, and maybe they were killed in their sleep. And so that's kind of what leads me to believe that the two girls were not the ones with defensive wounds in them. And Steve's interview marked the second time that the grieving dad has spoken out about his frustration with the slow investigation into his daughter's death. He had revealed to Fox News' Lawrence Jones over the weekend how he has not heard anything from law enforcement since last Wednesday's 5 p.m. press conference, basically. This was the same night that local authorities gave a disastrous press conference in which they once again admitted they still have no suspects in her and her friends' murders, and have not yet recovered a murder weapon. They're kind of just telling me that they can't tell me much, which is frustrating to me because I've been very trustworthy, Steve said of the investigators, revealing I do know things. I haven't shared things, which means that he has a little information that police are not sharing with us, which police are not sharing with him. And so that's an interesting comment from him as well during this interview. He said he does not want to talk badly about law enforcement because they are hard-working individuals, claiming he would be doomed without them. But Gonsalves admitted he is disappointed by the lack of information, as authorities say they are withholding details in an effort to catch the killer, to basically tighten their case. So they cannot share much. And this is well known. They just cannot share much. And they say that they are not releasing a profile of the suspect because it could lead to more fear and suspicion in the college town, which is already on edge following the gruesome murders, with some students refusing to return to classes. It will potentially put more fear, more suspicion on a wide variety of people versus if we use that to really refine where we are at in our investigation. And this was a quote by Idaho State Police Communications Director Aaron Snell, who told Jones this. I think that will be more pertinent. And so if we just provide information to the public, I just don't think that's going to be a wise choice. In the meantime, Mr. Gonsalves said, we are holding our tongue. We are waiting patiently, but we are definitely concerned. He asked anyone with information about his daughter's whereabouts the night of November 12th and into November 13th to come forward and speak to law enforcement officials, saying they may provide the missing key to helping unravel the mystery. According to police, the pair arrived home at 1:45 a.m. at the same time as Ethan and Zaina, and 45 minutes after their other roommates, Dylan Mortensen. Now, of course, this timeline has been changed a little bit where they didn't all show up at 1:45. Let me make sure that I'm correct on that. They have updated this a little bit. Ethan and Zaina are said to have gotten there, and then the girls, and then the roommates who all got there. So, I mean, not too far apart from one another, but the two roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, they miraculously survived the attack. And after the two arrived, about 45 minutes after their other roommates, Dylan. So after they all arrived, it looks like the girls might have gotten in later than everyone, somewhere around. Again, still a little shaky on this timeline. But less than 2 hours later, Madison, Kaylee, Zaina, and Ethan were all dead, butchered as they slept by a knife-wielding villain. Now, officials have insisted over the past month that the quadruple stabbing was a targeted attack, with Mr. Aaron Snell, the Idaho State Police spokesperson, saying that all four of the victims could have been the intended attacks. So he's saying that all four could have been the intended attack. We really don't know. He said police have now mostly finished investigating the crime scene and revealed that plans to release the scene are underway, but noted that it won't be released until cops are sure there is nothing left to retrieve, which is probably why they have now seized the 5 vehicles, some belonging to the surviving victims, some or the surviving roommates, and some belonging to the victims. And so in the meantime, most of the police work is now being done behind the scenes with crime lab testing and reports. Investigations are very difficult. Potentially, it could go for quite a while. But if we have some leads that lead us to a potential suspect, and quickly, we don't try and estimate or speculate on the length of the investigation, Mr. Snell would say. Obviously, our goal would have been to solve this last week, so we don't have a timeline. We are receiving a lot of quality tips and have done over 150 interviews. So all the information that has been received is building that whole picture. Since we don't have a suspect at this time and we don't have a weapon, it's really difficult to find out what happened. So what we have to do is try and build this picture of what occurred on that night. The relationships that the four of them had. Was there anything suspicious in those? Are there any tidbits of information we can draw from that? Did anything occur in the evening of the night? Was there anything out of the ordinary that occurred to them and the movements of the residents themselves? But despite the difficulty, Snell said he is confident police will eventually unravel the mystery of what happened and bring the killer to justice. He said, "We have not identified anybody who was involved in this, so we for sure do not want to say we think they came through whatever door and did this, because once we do that, we start going down a rabbit hole. And then all these ancillary facts that might point to something else, then maybe we would miss those." Investigators truly are doing a phenomenal job. All the debriefs and stuff we do upstairs, they really are talking about this entire picture. They're trying not to get pigeonholed into all these various theories and motives because we are not entirely sure what they are right now. Once they get that picture, I think we're going to see something. In a criminal investigation, providing information is delicate. If we provide it, then potentially we could ruin the investigation and the prosecution that we hope to have. That is the ultimate goal. Bring justice through prosecution. That was all from Mr. Aaron Snell, the Idaho State Police spokesperson. And so this question has come up time and time again about the dog. Police investigating the violent murders, they have not confirmed whether the dog inside the home was barking around the time of the slayings. In the 2 weeks since this brutal slaying that was done inside their King Road home, swaths of social media users are questioning, among other things, whether one of the victims' dogs was heard barking at the time of the attacks. The answer, some speculate, could indicate whether the animal might have been familiar with the attacker, who has evaded police since this November 13th tragedy. And it's reasons like this that are leading people to say the boyfriend must have something to do with it. The ex-boyfriend must have something to do with it. Because of why didn't the dog bark? Why didn't the roommates hear the dog barking? Or why didn't it alarm anyone? But again, Mr. Snell trying to put an end to a lot of this. He said that, investigators have made no confirmation on the dog other than that it was in the residence when officers arrived just before noon. Snell was responding to a question asked if police had confirmed that the animal was not barking as some have speculated. He previously told Fox News the results of forensic tests and DNA analysis are still pending. He added that investigators are making substantial progress in the case. And I want to talk about this I want to talk about the DNA there is some DNA that has been found. Maybe it was under the fingertips of the girls or whoever had the defensive wounds. There's probably a good chance that there was some DNA found. Nancy Grace kind of talked on this. You probably know Nancy Grace. She's well known in the crime world for being a former prosecutor turned media specialist or whatever we would call her. But she was sharing that the DNA, of course, they're always going to put the DNA into a CODIS. Now, CODIS, this is something that has evolved over decades now, where they have found that some people who were convicted of crimes, the DNA has helped get them off as, nope, this was not the perpetrator that you guys put away. So she has shared that that DNA that was found at the crime scene has been put into CODIS, and obviously no one has been a match, meaning that the person most likely did not have a felony. Kind of also leading to, then maybe it was someone young, maybe it was a student, but there was some DNA found, and so far it has not been tied to anyone who was in the system. That's normal. Of course, that's going to be one of the first things. If there is any DNA, it's going to be put to CODIS to see if there's a match to anyone with a felony, former person who might have been in trouble, or anything along those lines. And so, but it does look like that they might have some DNA that was retrieved from the crime scene. So maybe it doesn't help today, but having that DNA, when they finally get a person of interest, when they finally get a suspect, there's going to be a chance they're going to match that DNA to a person. Now, again, we're still learning more about this, but at the same time, that's what we do know so far in that. Now, police did share that they received more than 488 digital media submissions through the FBI portal, which is also how they were able to update their timeline around the girls. Now, some of the victims appear to have tried to defend themselves. As I was sharing, they are believed to have been killed using a single fixed blade knife, police have said. Meanwhile, officials said that investigators had received information that Gonsalves could have had a stalker. Investigators looked extensively into these reports, and they have pursued hundreds of pieces of information related to the stalker tip. They have been unable to confirm this information or identify a stalker. So they have not been able to confirm that there was a stalker. They haven't been able to confirm that there was not a stalker. Moscow Police Chief Captain Roger Lanier, he added that police learned while conducting interviews that Gonsalves had made some comments about a stalker. And we have followed up looking at specific time frames and specific areas of town. He continued, so far we have not been able to corroborate it, but we are not done looking into that piece of information. Now, Idaho Governor Brad Little has since allocated up to $1 million towards the ongoing investigation. Hopefully, this increases the reward. This helps, I know, pays for the salary of all the FBI, all the people that are having to put in the extensive amount of hours. I know over Thanksgiving, they were putting in a lot of man hours. From what I can tell, they are doing a lot around this. And my whole purpose of continuously reporting, this has to stay in the forefront. We cannot let this go cold. We cannot let this die out. My guess is 4 families are affected, and they are probably pounding the phones, doing everything they can to keep this in the spotlight. So I personally, thank you, Governor Brad Little of Idaho, for allocating up to $1 million toward the ongoing investigation. And so I kind of wanted to follow up on some of the things that I have reported on following the media. And so the first thing, it looks like they definitely did write off this. I shared in my last coverage of this of Sandra Ladd and Travis and Jamie Lynn Jewton. It looks like these two cases that were strikingly similar in each other, it doesn't look like there's any relation to one another. All three crimes, they do involve multiple stab wounds and were carried out on, they will all carry out kind of similarities between the stabbings and happening while they slept. But despite those similarities, investigating the Idaho killings, detectives say there does not appear to be any evidence to support that the cases are related. Such assurances are doing little to calm the nerves of University of Idaho students returning to school after this break. But it does look like, that has been put to bed. And some of the other thing, the dog that was skinned nearby, where the couple said that they wonder if there was any any relation to one another. It does not look like that the skinned dog has anything to do with this as well. So that looks like that has been ruled out. And so, of course, the owner, Pam, and said that her mini Australian Shepherd dog was butchered to death just 3 miles from the home where the students died. She also said that it looked like her dog was filleted. The incident was reported to Latah County Sheriff's Office, which passed the information to Moscow police. And so investigators trying to track down the students' killers, they dispelled any rumors that the cases were connected. Detectives are aware, but they said at this time it does not look like there's any links of this being. And they also said there was no link to reports of dead animals being left on a resident's property. Doesn't look like there was any there wasn't any relation to that either. And so, now some students that are too afraid to return to class, they've opted to do remote learning. And there's, there's heightened security even on campus, particularly around sorority and fraternity houses. So police, they've described a sense of fear in the community as they continue to say they have no suspects. And you probably heard about the red Mustang. That too is not connected to this. And so this online reports of a red Mustang on South Deacon Street being processed as part of the murder investigation. This information is not accurate and the vehicle is not connected to this. And so there was media questions regarding a February 22 death on Baker Street. The Latah County Coroner's Office confirmed the death was due to an overdose, has nothing to do with this. And detectives are looking for any context to the events and people involved in these murders. And they're asking to assist with the ongoing investigation, any odd or out of the ordinary events that took place should be reported. And so even if you thought like, they probably won't want this, they're asking, please, 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 please share that information as well. They're saying that any little bit of information could potentially help. And so police are asking for any help. The Moscow police, they're urging, submit any images or information that you believe could be important or useful, even if you believe it could not. Just do what you can. We have to keep this in the forefront. And I'm guessing a lot of you following this story would agree. Because that I've learned is one of the things you can tell with a story that is getting national attention right out of the gate, It all comes down to how big of a story, and we don't want this story to die out. So we're wanting to share everything we can. And that's why you're encouraged, if you have any information, you're urged to contact Moscow Police at 208-883-7180, or that tip line that is on your screen. And so that is important as you're sharing. At the end of the day, we just want justice for these people. This should not have happened. Unfortunately, these stupid things do happen. And my friends, if this is the type of content you like to follow, hit that subscribe button. That way you know whenever we go live or we share any uploaded content. It's been a while since I've uploaded content. I've just been going live the whole time. And I'm sorry for these ugly spam bots in the chat. I need to figure out how not to get those stupid things on there. My friends, I'm Manny Rodriguez. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Deep True Crime. Thank you and have a great day, and I look forward to serving you again. Peace. Have a great one.